We are entering some rather unknown territory here, guys. We are going to introduce a few things you've never seen before, but essentially it all has to do with the way data is going to flow and cross-reference and establish its mathematical domain, right? Its minimums and its maximums. So we need to map circles to these points and then establish a maximum circle radius, a minimum circle radius, and all of the scalar relationships in between. Okay, so we're going to I'm pretty much just going to build this in a linear fashion with you, and then you'll see and understand the relationship at the end. Do I expect you to be able to replicate it? No, not necessarily. But I do expect you to keep this one close by because it speaks a lot to the different possibilities you have with domains and grids, essentially. If nothing else, then you'll have that. Okay, so the next couple steps are basically relating to establishing the circles on the points. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop in under the curve menu my circles. And the one thing that we can do right now that will not change, even though there's a bunch of things that have to happen before we get there, is we can map the base point of the circle to the points that we just created. So I'll just plug that in right now, right there. And you'll see when you zoom in, they're really, really tiny, but they're there. And at the same time, I'm going to turn my preview off for my points so that it just shows up as circles. Yes? Oh. So what we need to do now, and this is less intuitive, so just follow along closely, is we need to set up our mathematical, well, not mathematical, I'll just say numerical minimum and maximum domains for the radius circle. So, well, I guess more it's just minimum. But that's done under, and I forget where it's actually located, but min. And that is under math and utilities. Okay, so we are going to establish a minimum radius for these circles. And so that minimum radius is going to be based off of a comparison to what we read off of the image as possible grayscale indices. And by indices, I mean the percentage or value to which it is white or black. Okay, so I do know that I need to feed into this the points that I want to read into the image. And I want to filter those points. So filter is under params. I'm forgetting where it is now. Sets. Sorry, it's under sets, tree, stream, filter. So filter we're using in a less traditional sense here. We're using this as a switch. So we're not going to feed anything to the 0 value, but we are going to feed the image sampler into the 1 value so that we can turn the calculation off and then toggle it, right, because the gate is going to be a 0 or a 1. It's a Boolean input. Well, right now it's Boolean. We can turn it off or we can turn it on. So if I go to filter and I drop the image sampler in, notice how right here it's saying the index of the gate stream is going to be, right now it's 0. If you zoom in, you can add as many filters as you want and this is kind of where your options or variables, variations I should say, come in. You can add as many as you want and put a number slider on it, and then it'll just pick 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, so on and so forth. Or you can leave it at 0 and 1 and use a Boolean toggle, which creates a trigger switch. So under params, under input, we can drop in a Boolean toggle. And the reason this works is because when it's false, it's a value of 0, and when it's true, it's a value of 1. So notice how the input now is 1. And you'll see over here on the output that the S, the stream, is changing. If I go to false, it says 0. True, it says 1. So it's like your light switch, essentially. This is a switch. Okay, and the last thing that I want to do in order to just get the circles mapped correctly is to oh, sorry. There's something that you should be aware of here, that the output here, these 1,500 points that we have, they're all reading an index value of 0 to 1. So 0 to 1 being the percentage point that it exists as. I think this one is mapping the color, not the position. It should be the color, because the index is the position. Does that make sense to any of you? No? So it already has a position, right? Because your index point in the bottom left corner is going to be index 0. So this number should be measuring how gray or how black or how white this particular point is. So it already has an inherent position. This is reading what the grayscale value is, which we can multiply in order to assign it to a radius. So that's what we're going to do, right? And so since it's a percentage, right, 0 to 1, it's a percentage, we can go under math and operators and multiplication, and we'll plug this in here, and we'll plug that multiplier into the A for our minimum, and we'll essentially take a slider from 0 to 5. I might change that later, but I'll go 0 to 5, and I can pump that one all the way up to 5, and I'll do the same thing down here. And now we have some variables. Okay, so I want you to take a moment to play around with the number of steps that we have in each of these ranges and try to understand the way that it's behaving. So as you scroll upwards, you'll see that sometimes it creates a relatively organized pattern that you can then modify, and you'll kind of get a sense of some of that image actually being in your workspace. And eventually you'll land on a position where you can see the image. Okay, so I mean, you already have the numbers there, but play around with it for a couple minutes here to try and understand how it's behaving.